Some disappearances shake a family, others shake an entire community, because sometimes it's not just the mystery itself that hurts people. It's the feeling that the person who vanished was never treated with urgency in the first place. And for many people watching this case unfold, that became the story of Jelani Day. Jelani Day was 25 years old, a graduate student at Illinois State University studying speech pathology, intelligent, ambitious, driven. The kind of young man his family believed was destined to do something meaningful with his life. He loved music, fashion, taking pictures, spending time with people he cared about. His smile stood out immediately in photos, bright, confident, full of personality. To his mother, Carmen Bolden Day, he wasn't a headline or a hashtag. He was her son, and before he disappeared, there were signs that something wasn't right. In late August of 2021, family members noticed changes in Jelani's behavior. According to reports, he sounded stressed during phone conversations. At one point, his mother said he seemed disoriented and emotionally overwhelmed. Then came August 24th. That was the last day Jelani Day was seen alive. Surveillance footage captured him walking near a dispensary in Bloomington, Illinois. In the video, he appears alone, calm, wearing blue shorts, a graphic t-shirt, and a black Detroit Lions cap. After that, he vanished. Days passed with no answers. Then investigators discovered his car abandoned in a wooded area near Peru, Illinois, nearly 60 miles away from where he was last seen. The vehicle itself raised questions. His clothes were found inside. His wallet was there. His phone was missing. And not far from where the car was located, authorities made another discovery: a body found floating in the Illinois River. But what happened next would outrage people across the country, because for days, that body remained unidentified, even though Jelani had already been reported missing, even though his family was desperately searching for him, even though authorities had access to information that should have accelerated the identification process. His mother says she repeatedly begged officials to take the case seriously. Instead, she felt ignored. And as the days turned into weeks, a painful question began spreading online. If Jelani Day had been a young white college student, would this case have been handled differently? That question would ignite national attention, because now this was no longer just a missing persons case. It was becoming something bigger, a story about visibility, a story about race, and a story about whose disappearances become national emergencies and whose don't. By late September 2021, Jelani Day's family had already been living through weeks of uncertainty. His car had been found abandoned. A body had been recovered from the Illinois River, and still, they were waiting for answers. What made the situation even more painful was the delay in identifying the body. According to reports, the remains discovered on September 4th were not officially identified as Jelani Day until September 23rd, nearly 3 weeks later. Authorities used dental records and DNA testing to confirm the identification. For Jelani's family, that delay felt impossible to understand, because by that point, Jelani had already been reported missing. His family had already been pleading publicly for help. His car had already been connected to the investigation. Inside the car, investigators found personal belongings, but Jelani was nowhere to be found. His clothing was discovered. His wallet was reportedly still there, but his phone was missing. And for a family searching for answers, every item left behind became another question. Why was the car there? How did it get there? Who was with him? And why would Jelani leave behind things he would normally need? This was no longer only about a missing graduate student. Now people were asking whether race played a role in how the case was handled. The comparison many people brought up was impossible to ignore. Around the same time, the disappearance of Gabby Petito dominated national headlines. News coverage was constant. Social media exploded. Search efforts became national news almost overnight. Meanwhile, Jelani Day's family says they struggled just to get visibility. That contrast sparked renewed debate over something often referred to as missing white woman syndrome. The idea that missing white women frequently receive more media attention, urgency, and public sympathy than missing black victims. For Jelani's family, this wasn't political. It was personal. Because while television networks spent days covering other disappearances, they felt their son's story was being overlooked. And even after Jelani was identified, major questions still remained unanswered. Authorities later ruled his death as drowning and stated there was no evidence of foul play, but the circumstances surrounding how he ended up in the river and the timeline leading there continued to trouble both his family and many members of the public. Because to this day, people still ask, how did Jelani Day end up alone, miles away from home, with his car abandoned in the woods and his body in the river? And why did it feel like his family had to fight so hard just to make people pay attention? Even after authorities identified Jelani Day and ruled his death a drowning, the case did not settle in the minds of the public. If anything, the questions only grew louder. Because for Jelani's family, the official explanation never fully connected the dots. His mother repeatedly said she believed something happened to her son before he entered that river. She questioned the timeline, the investigation, and the circumstances surrounding his disappearance. And as more people learned the details of the case, many began asking those same questions themselves. How does a graduate student vanish without explanation? How does his car end up abandoned in a wooded area nearly an hour away? Why was his phone never recovered? And what exactly happened during the days between Jelani last being seen and his body being discovered? Those unanswered questions fueled growing public attention online. Social media users began sharing Jelani's story across TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Hashtags demanding justice spread rapidly. Independent creators and activists pushed the case into spaces traditional media initially had not. And slowly more people started paying attention. Civil rights attorney Ben Crump joined the family in demanding transparency and accountability. Press conferences were held. Community members gathered to support the Day family. Interviews with Carmen Bolden Day became emotional reminders that behind every headline was a grieving mother still searching for clarity. But there was another uncomfortable layer to this case that continued to resonate deeply with people across the country. Visibility. Many people believe Jelani's case exposed a painful truth about whose disappearances receive immediate national attention and whose do not. Because while his family fought desperately to keep his name circulating, they watched other missing persons cases dominate television coverage for weeks at a time. That frustration became part of the story itself, not just what happened to Jelani Day, but why it felt like his family had to work so hard just to make America notice. And even now, years later, conversations around this case still continue online because so many people feel there are pieces missing. Not necessarily conspiracy, but gaps, unanswered questions, moments in the timeline that still don't feel fully explained. For the Day family, the pain is no longer just about the loss of Jelani. It is also about the feeling that they have spent years fighting to keep his name alive in a system that seemed too comfortable letting it fade. But beyond the headlines and debates, there is something more important to remember. Jelani Day was a son, a student, a young black man with goals, intelligence, personality, and people loved him deeply. He was supposed to have a future. And perhaps that is the hardest part of the story. Not just that he disappeared, but how quickly a life full of promise can become another name people scroll past. At Wide Eyes Media, we tell these stories because remembrance matters, because being forgotten is the second tragedy. So tonight we remember the name, Jelani Day.